So welcome to the Coaching Culture podcast today. My name's Jo Wright, and today I'm speaking to the wonderful Toby Fowlston, CEO of Robert Walters and Walters People. Thank you, Toby, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And we're going to talk today about organisational culture, trust. You've got a huge role out there in Singapore, and I know you're moving back to the UK soon, which is brilliant to have you back over here. It'd be lovely if you could share today for our listeners a little bit more about yourself and your story and who you are, what you do at Robert Walters, because I think people love to know about other people and, who are you?
Sure, yeah, no problems. So firstly, thanks for having me, Jo. Really appreciate you inviting me. I'm a 46-year-old man, father of three. I'm English, that's where I grew up. I actually grew up down in Somerset, so I without knowing it at the time, a lot of what I guess I use now is stuff that I probably picked up from my parents, actually. So I grew up on a stud farm with lots of horses, and I called it Noah's Ark. There was dogs and horses and cats and goats and all sorts. And I had a wonderful childhood. And I remember, so we probably had about 150 horses at any one time on the stud farm.
Wow.
And my father and mother, they worked incredibly hard, but I'll never forget, every evening my father would sit down, he'd have his one glass of whiskey, and he'd start his calls, because people treat their horses almost like their children, and in some cases even more important than their own children. And there's a real responsibility that my father always took to phone. He'd always make certain he phoned the clients at least once a week. So every night he'd have a rota of calls, and
Brilliant.
He would just phone and let them know how their horse is and how their horse is getting on. And he would often get me and my two brothers out of bed at sort of 5 o'clock in the morning and help walk the horses. And there was a sort of without knowing it, he was building in, I guess, this sort of hard work culture. And I reflect back on it now, and I realize just, that service that he gave back to his clients, I guess. And how importantly he took that as well. So I left home. I went to university. I studied law. I was not a good lawyer, but I became a solicitor, qualified solicitor.
Yeah.
And then I left the day I qualified with the sort of blessing of my law partner who sort of coached me through those 2 years. And then I joined this company called Robert Walters. And it was 1999, crikey. So 22 years ago.
Wow.
And it was, I didn't even know you could have a career in recruitment. I was completely unaware of that. And I came into this office in London, and I was just blown away by the energy. And I'd grown up in a sort of a small provincial law firm. And suddenly there's all these people, and there's boards, and there's noise and energy. And I thought, this is great. And that's really how it started. And, over that 22-year period, I worked obviously in London until 2012, and then got the opportunity to move to Singapore, and then that became Southeast Asia, and then that became APAC, and obviously more recently the job here. So I sort of reflect and think where I've come from and the opportunities I've been afforded. I sometimes sort of forget just how fortunate I've been.
Oh, it sounds like it sounds a fabulous career, and I'm sure that you've also made that happen. You may have been fortunate, but you've been the one who's made that happen. And actually, I suppose making that leap out of law was probably quite an important point in time.
Yeah, and I knew that I wasn't very good at it, if I'm honest. And I remember at the time, some friends of mine said you should look at recruitment. And I went to meet Robert Walters. We always do sort of 7 or 8 interviews, one after another, because it's all about connection you're getting with, you're working with. And I just knew, I just walked out of there and thought, that's a company I want to work for. And I worked for a guy who was an ex-teacher, actually, a chap called Jeremy. And he was a great sort of mentor, very simple sort of training styles. You're going to sit with me for 3 months, apart from when I go to the loo or bed, and you're just going to listen and do all the things I ask you to do. He'd never answer my question. He'd always make me think about the answer.
Oh, I like him already.
And it was fantastic, and I had it was just a great induction. And I've been there, as I say, for the last 22 years. And I think the other thing actually is that he gave me a bit of advice, which was always, whatever opportunity you get presented with, just take it, go for it, don't overthink it. And I think moving to Singapore, and I've got my wife as well to thank for that, because she was hugely supportive. And that just opened up a whole different world in terms of just how I looked at things and considered things. And it's been a wonderful experience.
Oh, fantastic. What a fabulous introduction. And I love that kind of take the opportunity. You know, I always think about that. Take the opportunity and figure it out later. Figure it out later. Just get that opportunity, because who knows where it may go. And, you know, he sounds a great mentor and great advice from Jeremy for sure. So thank you for that. Tell us, so obviously Robert Walters, huge global recruitment company. You know, we've had a number of conversations here at Coaching Culture with Robert Walters in terms of the culture. And I interviewed one of your colleagues, Indy, for the magazine last year. And something really special, you know, it sparked something real inside me. And I knew that we were very aligned in our sort of thinking, our philosophies of people, leadership, what matters. And how Indy spoke to me was with such passion. I'd love you to share, you know, you've got a huge role over there. I'd love you to share what is special and unique about Robert Walters, and how have you done that?
Sure. So it's quite difficult, actually, because obviously I've only ever worked at Robert Walters. So I guess I am one of those institutionalized people, maybe.
Yeah.
So I can't compare it with sort of 5 other companies I've worked for. But I think thinking about, you know, why is it I've stayed at Robert Walters? I mean, I've never even interviewed for another job, which, sad or not, I'm not sure. But the reason that I've stayed, we don't make anything. We don't manufacture anything. We don't have a product as such. So we're obviously about people. I think throughout my career, I've been very fortunate. I've always had bosses who have given me a large degree of autonomy.
Yeah.
I think we generally are not a particularly ego-driven culture. I mean, I remember we were trying to think about sort of purpose statements and how we define this. At one point, I mean, we didn't go ahead with it, but I loved that the All Blacks, I hope I don't offend anyone saying this, but I think the All Blacks policy, and it's in their legacy book, was no dickheads allowed.
Yes, I see that a few times actually written around.
Now, we couldn't apply that one, but my growing up at Robert Walters was just really good people, and also it still is a lot of fun. And I think the fun element has been really challenged in the last 18 months. I think for everybody with clearly what's gone on. We've always sort of looked at the international exposure. I mean, we're a business that obviously do send people around the world, and we've got hundreds of people that have had that opportunity. And for me, it's always been around, we hire these people that come from all sorts of different backgrounds, and we often actually hire people from industries, so not necessarily from recruitment backgrounds. Okay. And I think what's made us unique is, if I think about the autonomy that we're given, the international opportunities, I think the fun element is a massive part of it. We're not a big company. I mean, we're 3,500 people. And I think we've been allowed to maintain some identity in terms of how we operate. You know, it's not sort of, I mean, clearly there's governance and so forth, but it's not completely stifling. And that's really it. And it's just every day. I mean, there's obviously some bad days, but generally I wake up, and I think shifting jobs as well is the other thing. I think I've done 9 or 10 different jobs. Yeah. And I made a decision in my career that when I was a bit younger, that it would either be going down the sort of the managerial leadership route, or I could have stayed as a sort of just as a consultant dealing with recruitment. And I wanted to learn, the clients and stuff. And I wanted to learn how to build a business and run a business.
Well, it sounds like you've done a great job. And what do you mean when you say fun? Tell me what fun means to Robert Walters then. I'm definitely, there's lots of words you've already said that I'll definitely pick back up on, but tell me what fun means, because fun is different things to different people, teams, cultures. I mean, in lockdown, we've kind of acquired the words Forced Fun Friday, just out of, to make people laugh more than anything, in terms of actually we're going to do things to lighten the mood, cheer people up. And it's not kind of, you will have fun, but, you know, we just coined the phrase Forced Fun Friday because we did things like video calls with quizzing, you know, the things to get people trying to talk on a call. What does fun mean to Robert Walters with a global organisation?
Yeah, and I mean, so when I first joined, I mean, for me personally, I came from London, so it was very, it was the old sort of, you know, go to the pub, have some drinks, all that stuff. But actually, I mean, it's less about that, I think, globally for our organization. I mean, the region I've been in, Asia Pacific, I mean, food is at the absolute epicenter of almost everything.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot of sort of wellness campaigns. We have running clubs. We have kite clubs. I was looking at our Dubai business the other day. They're one of the few offices that are sort of back now working globally. They have a golf evening where the whole office goes out. I think initially the sort of on-screen drinks thing was working, but I think people got a bit tired of that.
Yes.
And then it became sort of check-in walks. I was talking to the lady who runs our Belgian business. Yeah. You know, they'd often go for just a walk around the park and do their meetings as they're having a coffee and sat on a park bench. So there's a myriad of different things. And I think one of the things that's really important is actually, and I believe in this as well, is actually saying to people, you know, what do you want to do? What is it that actually, it's not me instructing people and telling them how to feel. It's what is it that you think your team want to do?
Brilliant.
And we've had painting competition. I mean, it's been a whole range of different. So, I mean, we're fortunate. We're quite an energetic company. And I think we've got a lot of quite creative people. So, yeah, I think it has been compromised there. Obviously, it's been hard. We haven't been together. And I think, we are generally best as an organisation when we are together.
Okay, so this year has obviously challenged that for so many organisations. It does sound an amazing place to work. It really does. And, you know, it's the sort of culture that I think, you know, I get to speak to lots of different organisations, and it seems to be the culture that they're aspiring for on so many levels, because once you've got the people engaged and enjoying the work and having fun, the rest follows. And it sounds like, you know, I just love it. I mean, painting competition, I definitely would not have succeeded at that, to be fair. But I certainly know people in our team would have done who are great at cartoons and things. But, you know, just going for walks and talks, it's lovely rather than stifling. The opposite of all of this is stifling people in a room, in a box. And that's the opposite. So this is why I've got you to speak to us today, because I think so many other organisations need to hear what you're saying, which is lovely. And in terms of the culture, it sounds fun. You talked about autonomy, which again, I think is a hugely important factor in culture, in building an organisational culture. But where there's autonomy, there needs to be trust. How do you work on that?
When I remember when I first, so firstly, for me, it's about doing what I say, me doing that. And I like to think that probably the style which I operate with is not, it's an old adage, isn't it? Have they performed yet? Yes, they have. Okay, now we'll trust them. Rather than perhaps looking, going, well, hang on, we've invited this person into our company and they thankfully have accepted, which is great. So that's the point at which surely the trust begins. Yeah. With that, you hope the performance will follow, because I think generally people, they feel trusted, they feel that they are being given that, you know, that autonomy. Then generally that tends to get the best out of people, in my opinion. It was very interesting though, when I first moved to Asia, I remember a lady I was working with at the time, this was day one, and I sat down with her and we were working quite closely together. And I didn't know her, she didn't know me. And I just said that the most important thing is, you know, you and I really need to trust one another from day one.
Yep.
And she just said to me, she goes, Toby, I agree, but just remember, particularly in Asia, yes can mean yes and yes can mean no, and you've got to work out which one it is.
Whoa, that's not helpful. That's not helpful.
Wow, okay, this is going to be complicated. But also I think about the performance you're trying to create, and you know, I think it's about trying to create an environment where people feel they can speak up, they are allowed an opinion, they can have an opinion. I think it's healthy that people feel that they can be they can express their views. You don't have to agree with it, and that's okay. You know, healthy debate's perfectly normal. I think probably more so in the last 18 months, you know, there've been a lot of, I think we've all asked ourselves a lot of questions around, you know, how we lead in this type of environment, how we lead virtually. Are we pressing people too hard? Are we not pressing people enough? Are they okay? Actually, you know, these sort of check-in conversations, you know, we've absolutely had people that have really struggled over the last 18 months. Yeah. And I think, you know, the ability for people to just say, no, I'm not okay, actually. I'm finding this really tough.
Yeah.
And, and actually you mentioned Indy's been brilliant at sort of helping us. And, it's an evolution for us. And I think we're starting to learn a bit more around, how we do lead in this type of environment. I think the other thing is, and it sounds very sort of contrite, but fundamentally just good manners. And the thank yous, the pleases. I remember I won't say where, but it's one of our offices. This was a few years ago. And I remember walking in and it was very quiet. No one was really saying anything. And generally we were doing okay in the office. And then the next morning I walked in with the guy who's running the office, and he didn't say a word to anybody.
Oh.
Good morning, nothing at all. And it became very clear that was the mood that was being set from the beginning of the day, and it just lasted throughout the whole day.
Yeah. Well,
so it's incredibly important, and it doesn't always automatically come. But I think if the intention is that I want to trust from day one, and I behave in that way and give people that autonomy, I think that's a good starting point.
And obviously, trust is something that you feel. You can't kind of touch it. How does that come through in people at Robert Walters? When they join from day one, how do they know that's what's, that's the culture? How does it kind of come about in reality?
Yeah, the way we interview is we tend to get, obviously we get various people involved. I'm always very keen on actually people in the team going out for a bite to eat with the individual that are joining.
Lovely.
And actually I'll always encourage the person to say, it's not really an interview, it's just a conversation. But I'll encourage them to say, look, we've got nothing to hide. Ask them.
Yeah.
Ask them what the environment's like. You need to be really comfortable. Here are the expectations, and best you hear it from them. Do you know anybody who used to work at Robert Walters? Yes, I do. Okay, great. Speak to them first before you accept anything.
Yep.
Trying to strip away any sort of, there's something being hidden here.
Yep.
I think that's a critical point. I think the actual whole interview process is, I think, also incredibly important. And remembering that it's a two-way process. We're not just interviewing the person; they're kind of interviewing us as well.
Absolutely.
And sort of really getting into the questions around, what are they concerned around? What are they worried about? But the consistency is probably the final thing. Consistency of mood, and I think. And it is really difficult, and I found it difficult. I've got 3 young children, you've got that, and then you're having an important conversation, which is their time. The person you're talking to, it's their conversation, and really thinking about trying to get present for that conversation when you've just had a blazing row with your daughter, and sort of stepping back, and in my head, I'm always thinking, just be consistent, Toby, with them. I think it's important that they can trust the fact that when they speak to me, I'm going to be calm, listening, engaged. And that does take some focus to make certain that I'm trying to be in that space all the time.
That sounds brilliant, and I think being present is something that is increasingly important. That's giving somebody your time, your attention, your focus, as you've just said, can get so much more back. But actually, with so much going on, like you said, you've got 3 daughters, you've just had a row, so much going on in the world. The phone might be flashing next to you with notifications. You're like, no, turn that over, turn that off. It's so much going on. But to actually give people your presence and your time, I think is part of building trust, which I think is, sounds so important at Robert Walters, which is lovely. And what about further throughout the organisation? So leaders and managers, it's clear that you're role modelling this at the very top of the organisation. How does this kind of get wider and wider?
Yeah, obviously there is a degree of osmosis, which I think happens. And I'm not saying we're perfect, far from it. We absolutely have our faults as an organisation. I think how you talk about people is really important as well. And I think supporting one another. We've all made mistakes, particularly in the last 2 years.
Yeah. And
actually knowing that you've got people's backs publicly, and also when they're not present as well. Yeah. I think that's a factor. One of the things which I feel very strongly about in our organisation is collaboration, and I think perhaps in parts of our business we can get better at that. We've got some amazing people who have done some amazing things, and other people who could really use the support from these individuals, who are, by the way, very willing to help. They just don't know.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the points is just trying to connect people within our company. And I'm very fortunate. I've been here a long time, so I know obviously quite a few people in the company, and where the sort of the good energy is coming.
Yeah. And
it's sort of thinking about, well, how can I get this person who's really struggling just to talk to that individual? And it is just, as I say, a conversation. It could be nothing more than that. I think we've done a lot in our talent development business, which is not something necessarily that we've done historically. And I think certainly the last 2 years, we've invested a lot of time in individual coaching at the leadership level as well. And then I think the final thing is, of course, just making certain that we're consistent, and whether it's tough times or not, trying to recognize that, it's not easy, and it can't always be about work.
And do you share with people, like you're sharing openly here and lots of people hear you speaking, do you share with others, when you're finding it tough? Kind of where does that go? Because being the CEO of a large organisation, sometimes it can be lonely at the top, I guess.
I didn't used to. I was very, very bad at it. No other reason than I just thought it's boring for people to hear it. But somebody said to me, which just stuck with me ever since they said it. It's about 5 years ago. Said, Toby, if you're not willing to share any of your weaknesses or sensitivities or whatever it might be, downtimes, you can't expect people to share back with you. And because I was asking them, they won't say anything to me. I keep asking the crowd. I'm obviously not getting something right here. And actually what I experienced was, and of course I have down days, absolutely. And I think, I don't necessarily volunteer it all the time, but I think if people are asking me, I have no problem being very honest about that.
Brilliant. So that's vulnerability in action in a good way, but learning through people not giving you stuff because you went back. Again, that to me, I call it kind of swapping the trust cards. You share that card, you'll get a card back, and it's like, to me, there's something so important about back to that authentic. It boils down to being humans, and we've got so much that. We talk about here a lot that you bring to work. It's not, you don't just turn up at work as a different person. You've got a whole lot of stuff going on in the background, and it will impact kind of how you feel at work. And actually, I think the role for leaders and managers is really to be able to tap into that, not wanting to use all the buzzwords, but it's true, emotional intelligence and, being authentic. And so it sounds like you do that in abundance through being told that you needed to share.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I mean, it's obviously there's areas I need to work on in my role, and I mean, one of the big, and it was really quite confronting actually, was when I got some feedback from my team, and this was maybe 2 years ago, and obviously I've had it verbally in the past, but it was written down on paper in front of me, and I read it. I thought, wow, okay. Some of it I was aware of, some of it I perhaps wasn't so aware of. Yeah. Some of it I didn't agree with. I was struggling to come to terms with that. Okay. I actually sat down with my wife and said, can you read this? And
is this me?
Yes, or no, actually I don't agree with that. But actually that was a really helpful exercise for me, because it was just a kind of a reassurance on some things and something to address in other areas as well.
Super. So you get me onto feedback then. Wow. I mean, I often talk about coaching being the silver bullet, but I think it has to be wrapped up with honest, truthful, positive, respectful feedback given in the right way. And I know at Robert Walters, feedback is hugely important. How does that kind of come about throughout the organisation? Because, we work with some organisations that are reluctant to focus on feedback, frightened of what's going to be said. And I sort of think, how can you learn? How can you improve? How can you develop and be the best you can be as an organisation, as a team, as an individual, without knowing those things that other people are thinking and knowing that your impact on others? So how do you kind of make that part and parcel of the culture at Robert Walters?
I think this is an area that we need to continue to improve in.
Yeah.
I think we're not great at it in a number of areas, actually.
Okay.
I mean, we have the traditional appraisals and, appraisals and all the rest of that, which is very helpful, and it's really good. The really meaningful conversations, and by virtue of the role I'm in, there are things obviously that I'll often hear, but there'll be a trust that I don't want to undermine. There'll be some confidentiality around it. There'll be people asking me just for advice or thoughts, and often I'm sat here going, how can we get that person talking to that person? Because a conversation will make a huge amount of difference, and I think it's about trying to encourage people to play that conversation through in their own head, and to be brave, and to recognize, well, if you don't have the conversation, what could happen, versus if you do have the conversation, what could happen. And it's not easy, and I think some people are very comfortable doing that. Some are not. Some see it as being sort of disrespectful, or that they're worried about it, or that they might be worried about a consequence. And, one of the things that I really want to continue to focus on is creating an environment where it's okay. It's absolutely fine to have that conversation. And actually, I really encourage it. It's not going to be simple. It will take time, because I think traditionally as an organisation, we haven't always been great at that particular part. And I think we're getting better at it.
Yeah, okay. Great. I mean, there's so much richness in what you're describing here. And in terms of, obviously, you've got to move back to the UK coming up next week. What about the learnings then from Singapore and your role out there, bringing to the UK? What's going to be either same, different? How's that going to be?
Yeah, I think when I came out to, and the only advice I give to anyone is, when I came out from what was London, obviously at the time, to Asia, I thought, I'm going to come in and just keep my mouth shut and just listen, and learn, because there was an awful amount that I had to learn, and that's what I did. And I was very fortunate. I had some very good people that when I joined Singapore in 2013. I think going back, I hope what I'm able to do is to provide some real balance around actually what's going on. I mean, the world is very complicated and it's vast, and there are so many sort of nuances and different. I mean, ultimately we're a recruitment company, so it's fundamentally different. But how each business operates, we talk a lot about culture, not just within our own organisation, but culture within each of the countries. There's absolutely differences there. And I think it's the ability to be able to come back, and I think this is where I can and do add value, is actually being able to say, we just need to be aware of that part of the world and what goes on there, or this part of the world and what's happening here. And of course, where I can, working as closely with local leadership. And I think one of the things I think we've done quite well actually as a business is that we do empower local leadership. It's not a sort of London says type business. I think probably in the past, perhaps that has happened at times. And I think over time we've realised actually, we've got to entrust local leadership who we've hired, who we trust, to make some of these decisions and do it on what we think is right for the business in that part of the world.
So from next week then, what will your new role be there in London? What's the next challenge for you?
So I'm going back. I've got to, it's been quite complicated. So we first thing is actually we've got to move into a house.
That's important.
That's kind of quite important, particularly the family. See family, which would be great. And then I actually have some time with my CEO, Rob, and our CFO, which I'm really looking forward to, because I haven't seen them for nearly 18 months.
Right.
So that's going to be good to actually see some other human beings. And I think then it'll be about sitting down. We've got some key objectives that we want to focus on and talk through, which we will. I think then it will be about settling back into the UK. And obviously there's a lot of people that I haven't seen for a long time. A lot of our group functional leaders, and spending some time with them. And the role continues. I mean, I've already started this role sort of 3 months ago. I mean, we're focused a lot around improving our customer experience, and that's very, very important in terms of us as an organisation. I'm particularly focused around our leadership development and our training programs as well, and we're looking at how we can support our business better. I think there's going to be things that I'm going to be learning as well in terms of the new role. We're doing an awful lot within ESG at the moment, and I'm really excited to understand and learn more about what we're doing as an organisation there, because that's traditionally sat at board level.
Yep.
And then right now we're hiring. I mean, we have got to hire people. Like every organisation, we are looking to hire great people in almost every country. And we've started this year, and actually financially, it's been a really good start to the year. I think it's about just making certain that our people are okay, and constantly making that a priority. But also, we desperately need to get good people in, because we have opportunities and we need people to fulfill those.
Considering it's been a challenging time over recent times, it still feels like you've got a lot of energy, you've been at Robert Walters 22 years. You've still got so much energy and passion for what's coming next. And, it feels that I can feel it through our screen. So I'm sure in person, people can feel that from you. So, it feels like you've got such a lot still to go for at Robert Walters for now and the future.
Yeah, I think there's so much opportunity across the world. I mean, when I think about where we are, we're in 31 countries.
Yep.
We've got huge amount of opportunity in the existing countries that we're already in.
Yeah.
There are obviously a few other geographies that we're not in, which is always a consideration. But I get energy from it, and there's things I do as well. I do sort of a lot of running and stuff, and that's my thinking time, and I enjoy that, and that energizes me. But I look at, frankly, quite miserable period we've had over the last 2 years. And arguably in a lot of places, things are starting to improve, and there's a bit more optimism, and vaccinations are rolling out. And personally, I look at that as, I really want us to seize that opportunity, because we haven't been able to do that in the last 2 years, really.
And I suppose, the more I read about things from the last year, there's a lot of people who've really reevaluated what matters to them. And a big part of our life is our work. And they've really reevaluated what kind of organisation they want to work for, culturally, leaders and managers, what are their kind of impact on them. So it feels like there's a huge opportunity to, within Robert Walters, within the organisations and your clients, there's probably going to be a shift in terms of the organisations that are winning from a recruitment to get the top talent and to get the best people, because they go, actually, I'm really clear now who I want to work for, and what's gone before won't be acceptable to them for the future. Clearly not Robert Walters, because that sounds like a phenomenal culture, which is brilliant. But do you think that's going to happen in terms of, people getting really clear now of, actually, it's culture now that really matters to me because of everything that I've reevaluated this year?
Yes, I do. And I think, we've obviously had some attrition, like every company, and speaking to actually India in particular and her HR team. My question has always been the people who didn't want to leave. Why have they left? What are the reasons around it? And also the people that are still in our organisation, what are they saying? What do they think? What's good? What's not so good? And actually, why do people stay at Robert Walters? And why do they leave? And there's a number of different reasons, but actually, probably the biggest one is culture. And of course, that's been compromised so much in the last 18 months, because that fun that I think we're well known for, a lot of that hasn't gone. So people, I think, are stepping back and going, okay, so what else is there? And that will come back, and with there's various things we're doing around that. I think the leadership development part is another really important factor. And I think we have a lot of relatively young and relatively experienced, but hugely capable leaders in our organisation. And I think I, for one, have certainly had my moments, and I've got 22 years experience, and I've gone, well, what are we going to do here? How are we going to get through this? And who do I talk to? And wow, this is hard. This is really tough. So I can only imagine that they're having the same feelings as well. And so then it's, what can we do to support them? And actually, it's not just as simple as a conversation with your line manager and everything's resolved. Often it goes a little bit deeper than that. And actually, I think people really understanding what they are as a leader, what they want to stand for as a leader, not being afraid to say what they want to stand for as a leader, how they're going to show up, the sorts of people they're going to hire, the sorts of conversations that they need to have in the organisation, which they perhaps haven't had, and how they're going to address that. And I put that into sort of meaningful conversations with good people in our company. I think talent development has been a big factor of that.
Super.
And I mean, last year alone, I mean, if I look at just at Asia Pacific, I mean, there was personal coaching for over 140 of our sort of managers, leaders in the organization. And, I'm not saying it's the answer to everything, but I think it's really got people just thinking a bit more.
We call it transformational conversations, but fundamentally it's the meaningful conversations. It's personal brand. How am I turning up at work? Who do I want to stand for? What do I want to stand for? Who am I? What's got me to be who I am today? So you've shared your brilliant story so far. What matters to me, and how can I be the best leader of my team? So yeah, it's so important. And I think the more we all share the importance behind meaningful conversations, for me, it's about getting to know the human, getting to know the full person. As we talked about before, about things go on outside of work, it'll filter somewhere in work. So actually, and leadership development is vital. And I think, getting that right in an organisation will really impact the culture and, the attrition, the retention. So, I absolutely love the sound of the things that go on at Robert Walters. I mean, the fun, the energy, the passion, the culture, it must filter through into how you work with your clients all the time. It really must make such a difference. And that's why you're a growing organisation.
Yeah, and like I say, we're certainly not perfect, far from it. We have our idiosyncrasies, I guess, like every other company. But the other thing I always remember, somebody said something to me about a year ago, and I'd never even considered it. But when I thought about it, it made complete sense. I got into this unknowing habit of having a conversation, quite a sort of action-focused conversation with somebody. And at the end of it, almost as a throwaway, it was, "How are you, by the way?" And I think it got received by people as, "Do you really care?" Or
P.S.
you just ask?
Yeah.
And actually, I did care, and I do care. But in my head, I just thought, let's get the work out the way, and then we can talk about. And actually, I've made a point to try and
flip it. Absolute. How are you? I often find that once you find out how the person is, you know exactly how they're turning up to the conversation first. Because actually, if you do the tasks first and then the how are you might like, oh, I should have asked that first, because actually that's probably just impacted what we've talked about. So yes, the more how are you, or what's on your mind is another great question. I love what's on your mind, and then and what else, I think draws out a lot and can really impact what's going on in the work stuff. So this is my final question for today then. It's advice. So you talked about advice that you'd been given earlier on from Jeremy, which sounded fabulous. What's the simplest advice that you would give to leaders in organisations who are wanting to build a great culture that would have the greatest impact? So what would be the one?
One? Wow.
All right. Okay. If you want more than one, we can barter.
Okay. There's probably a few. Be approachable. Shut up and listen.
Yeah.
I think encourage people to take risks, but be supportive of the fact that it might not work, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But let's go for it, and obviously you supporting them throughout that. It's interesting, actually. I look at some of our best people that we have in the organisation, and whether it was me or somebody else. Many of them really needed just a conversation to say, look, come on, you can do this. You've got this, and I've got your back, and you're more than capable of doing it. And obviously self-doubt creeps in, and we all, I guess, have an element of that. Can I really do it? You can do it. So let's do it. Let's go for it. And I think that's really powerful coming from somebody in a leadership role.
Yeah.
Obviously, the right type of people in the right types of roles. I mean, that goes without saying. And,
yeah.
And I think being prepared to take a calculated risk on good people.
Yeah.
And I think actually we have done that in a number of our markets where we've really backed and supported somebody who on paper might be a year too early or 2 years too early, but we've hopefully put them in a framework where they've got support around them. Their natural talent and ability has come through as well, of course, and they've really shone. And there's some fantastic examples we've got of some really relatively inexperienced years, but very successful and getting better. I think talk to people at all levels as much as you can, and it's that. Unfortunately, we're not having many at the moment, but it's that lift conversation, isn't it?
It is.
How are you and what's going on and how you're finding things. And the one value I got a huge amount from actually was doing new starter calls every month with every new starter in the organisation.
That's good.
And actually, that was an opportunity to just say, look, this is kind of what we are. This is what we're aiming to do. And I found that really helpful. And I remember actually, and sorry, I won't take up too much more time, but I remember having a conversation with a guy who joined us in our Japan business. He was a New Zealander. And I could tell that we were on Zoom and he was in his bedroom. And I said, you look like you're in your bedroom, and I get it, don't worry, I understand. And he basically explained that he'd just landed in Tokyo. He was really excited to be working for Robert Walters in Tokyo. He had no recruitment experience. He didn't know anyone in Tokyo. And I said, that is a major challenge. How are you going to deal with that?
Yeah.
Anyway, we had a good conversation, but it made me really realize just how much of a challenge it is for a lot of our new people joining the organisation. And then the final thing I was going to say was just be honest, be truthful.
Thank you so much for your time today. You honestly, you've enlightened so many of us now from this conversation, and very much made me smile a lot. The Robert Walters, I can see why Robert Walters is the brilliant organisation. Having people like yourself, it's kind of been textbooks brilliant. And I know you keep reminding me that you're not perfect and you've got things going on, but there's so many things you've said today. I just think if I could lift and drop into other organisations, that everything that people talk about that are the right ways to be. You've talked about being, you've talked about being real people, authentic, honest. You've shared so many brilliant stories that you've brought this to life through stories. And I absolutely can see why Robert Walters is the organisation it is. And I'm very thankful and delighted that Indy recommended us to speak, because she said you were the right person. And I think for people wanting to work with and for Robert Walters, I think absolutely brilliant organisation. And for me, you've described a coaching culture, which is obviously the name of our business, but you've described it in a nutshell in terms of that honesty, trust, feedback, conversation. The amount of times you've used the word, it's a conversation. Let's get more conversations. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. Is there anything else? I asked you for one thing and did get a nice long list, which was great. Is there anything else at all you would want to share with people today who are listening? Anything at all?
No, I don't think so, other than I think it's probably a challenge for a lot of us out there in leadership roles or not in leadership roles, really. And I think we've hopefully got better times ahead of us. I think there's a lot we've all probably learned over the last 2 years, and we'll continue to do so. So thank you very much for having me, Jo. It's been an absolute privilege to be here, and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thanks, Toby. And again, thank you to everybody for listening today to our Coaching Culture podcast. If you would like to listen to any more, please do tune in, because as you do know, coaching matters now more than ever. Thank you.